fool your audience into thinking that you're going to make a mediocre joke, but actually make a joke they couldn't even imagine was actually brewing in the background. But that's easier said than done, of course.
Just make an incredible joke at the end.
Will you just be more incredible?
Yeah.
Hello, you are listening to the Needs Work podcast. My name is Caroline Clifford. On this podcast, we discuss a piece of material, a piece of stand-up material that perhaps isn't working well as the comedian hoped, and I try and help them fix it. This week's guest is the amazing Theo Masonwood, who won the Berlin New Stand-Up Award 2023. He is a TV writer. He writes all kinds of comedy. He wrote on The Gentleman with his brother Billy, which is available on Netflix. You can see him performing all over Berlin. He's a performance artist. He's kind of does clowning, but mainly he's a very fantastic and very funny stand-up comedian and improviser. So please enjoy this discussion. Hello, Theo Masonwood. Welcome to Needs Work.
Hello, Caroline Clifford. I need work.
Yes. So you are a clown. Is that correct? Are the rumours true?
Every day, it always sounds derogatory when that's said. There's no nice way of saying that. I was talking about a friend about going to Edinburgh Fringe, like, are your clown friends going to be there? I am not a clown. I would say I have interest in clowning,
right.
And I've done a couple of clown courses. Now, if I were to say to other clowns that I was a clown, they would say,
yeah,
no,
must be joking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Though it's interesting because it's one of these things that I think it like cycles around in popularity where, you know, you'll have Sacha Baron Cohen. Mm-hmm. He'll suddenly get very popular and everyone will be like, he went to clown school, get him, you know. And so now everybody wants to do clowning because they think it's going to make them the next Sacha Baron Cohen. Yeah. And I feel like that's had like a resurgence recently, popularity, where it's almost like improv actually, where it's like, this thing will make you amazing at stand-up comedy. So you should do this thing. And I feel like it's having a resurgence.
Which of course it has for me.
Well, I think so. I mean, I certainly noticed clowning elements in your performance that definitely help. And I can't, I'm sure you could do it better than me. I can't specify exactly what clowning is, but it seems to be like you're in constant communion with the audience. Like you're never letting them not be part of what you're doing.
Yeah, very much so, I think. I mean, like, because I've done a couple of courses, but the big thing that you have to do is just get on stage with nothing, with no material, and make them laugh. And if you try to do anything which sounds like you're doing like a bit, then they just tell you to stop and you have to go and start again and again and again and again and again. And you kind of work out that the only way to kind of make anyone laugh is to just to try to really engage, try to look into the whites of everyone's eyes and try, and if something fails, then acknowledge the fact it's failed and not just be like, oh, I'm just going to move on, whatever. You know, there's no shame in being bad, and actually being bad is what can make you be good. I mean, you see it loads in stand-up when if people acknowledge that their joke is shit, they can get a big laugh out of it.
Absolutely. Of course, what they usually do is acknowledge that the audience is shit.
Yeah.
That doesn't usually go down so well. But I think it is definitely something that people should take on. I mean, even in the beginner's class where people are thinking about really a million other things than the audience, but it's still like, just make eye contact with them. Just at least react to what's going on in the room. I mean, you're not going to have an amazing zinger ready to go, but at least just feel them and it will like give you a good start. It's kind of like real clowning way before 101. It's just look at them.
Yeah, exactly. They exist. They are there. But I do think that's the important thing, right? It's like that. Why are we doing live performance? It's because it's live. Like if it wasn't, why not just do like TikTok reels or something like that? There's something, it's about like the immediacy of something actually happening in the room is why people are going into those rooms, and it's why it is potentially interesting. And I think more and more recently, I know I'm here to talk about some stand-up. I'm like, I would say not being so wed to my material.
100%.
A little bit being like, if the material's not working, then, you know, if someone's being loud and talking at the back, just talk about it and you acknowledge that, and everyone's laughing at that. Just follow the funny. Just keep on doing that.
And you certainly can't ignore it. You just can't ignore it because it just creates this stink in the room and everyone else can feel it. And they're like, this is the guy that's in charge.
I know.
It should be ignored. It's like if there's a fire and you're the fire marshal. You just be like, it's all right. It's fine. It's all right. We'll be all right.
They can smell a rat. They can really smell a rat. An audience knows if you're being shaken and just being like, yeah, well, anyway, I'm just going to carry on saying. It's like, no, obviously this woman in the corner is screaming. You've got to talk to the woman in the corner screaming.
And it will always come off as nerves when people just kind of smell a rat. It will always come off as this guy isn't very professional. Like that's unfortunately the way our brains always go. It wouldn't be like, oh, I'll give him a hall pass, he's just new. It'll just always come across as like, oh, I wish he was better.
I was doing probably the biggest gig of my life. I was supporting Reggie Watts, and I did a tiny bit of audience interaction where I'm talking about hemorrhoids, and I point to someone in the audience, I ask for their name, and I say they have hemorrhoids, and I asked her their name, and she said, I had cancer. And they were just like, there's about 400 people in the room, and there's just no way you can just be like, and you've got hemorrhoids. Just be like, well, I've just got to talk about this woman's cancer for about 5 to 10 minutes. And it was definitely the right call. And in a way, actually, the gig wasn't going very well. And as soon as she said that and I had something to talk about, everyone was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? So I just kind of went in on comparing my hemorrhoids to her cancer, and how hers is obviously a lot more important. And it really saved the show, actually, not just be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just talk to someone else then for a bit.
If only we could have saved her.
Yes.
Sometimes those things are say, and of course, cancer affects everybody, whether directly or a family member or something like that. So it's certainly a relatable subject, as dark as it might be. Oh boy, I feel for you though.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rough one.
And you do other types of performance, though. You do music and poetry,
yes,
and things like that. How would you describe that other stuff that you do that's not directly stand up?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's some which is definitely storytelling. Like before I did stand up, I did this act called Jean Penne, which was like I had tights over my head and I'd like tell stories over electronic music at like gigs in London. But it was definitely comedy, but it's not from my perspective. It's not like me being like, oh, well, I was on the street the other day. They're kind of like character pieces and stuff. A bit, I was at art school, I was trying to be avant-garde. My friends were in cool bands. And then that kind of changed and I started doing poetry stuff as well. For me, it's almost like I want to write bits which aren't to do with my perspective. It's like I find people's perspectives really funny. It's like, and I think the bit we're going to talk about is it's a lot about like having a strange perspective on the world. So having the songs, so if you start playing music in the background or you open a book of poems, then the audience immediately knows this is not him saying his own opinion. Now this is coming from a different perspective. It's like this is a song and you almost get to like step out of I'm Theo talking to you about my life into this new zone where you can be talking about, I can be performing a thing about my darling children, and obviously I don't have any children, and it's not confusing the audience to being like, wait, he said he didn't have any children, now he does because there's music behind it. It's almost like a dramaturgical move, and that's why I have the poetry book, so I can say basically the kind of shit one-liners, or the shit one-liners which I couldn't pull off just as me, but I can pull them off as poems almost.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen your music stuff on Instagram, and that's definitely someone else's perspective. And it definitely strikes me as like another voice. But when I see you do poems, that does seem more personal. Or do you pick those poems because you're in the middle of a stand-up set and...
They're less like, I think,
not personal. They're stupid as fuck.
Yeah,
but like they're from your point of view. Like they're
kind
about
of, yeah,
breakups and things like that.
Yeah, they are. I think that's. It was almost easier for me. I kind of felt like I didn't like doing so much like actually talking about myself anymore. Like actually really being personal, the stuff like I did your course and learned on your course, and then kind of like actually like I don't feel like, oh, I want to talk so much about myself. I want to have this kind of third person perspective or something. And the poetry was that, just writing down funny things, and then I could kind of like sew them, all these kind of weird little things together with a character of the poet who thinks he's really good.
Yeah, I would say generally it's very difficult to sew different styles together, particularly if you're doing like a 7-minute set, and I think you do it pretty well for sure. But I would say that like from what I've seen you do, what I saw you do when you won the Berlin Stand-Up Awards in, was it 22? Something? I don't remember anymore.
Last year, 23.
Yeah, 22. is, yes, it all seemed to have a personal thread to it. It all seemed real and relatable.
Yeah, it's that kind of. I think the poetry allows me to be more cocky than I am. Like, it allows me to be super cocky, and that's kind of the joke. I think is me like, I think I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm a poet,
but clearly you're a goofy clown.
I'm a but like I'm being an idiot, and that kind of I like. It allows that kind of like juxtaposition, which I think is pretty funny.
What about Berlin? Like, how do you? Because you've performed in both London and Berlin. I mean, how would you compare the two scenes?
So I haven't performed loads in London, and the ones I did perform at, the nights were really, really good, and the quality was really high. And I was like, oh God, this is what's going on in London. Huh? It's really good. In the Berlin scene, I feel like I'm doing less and less gigs. I feel like, and kind of concentrating on building bigger bits. So like working out like things to put into my hour or whatever. Doing less mics. I think.
But then you have to do mics, don't you, to build the bits?
Exactly. You have to do mics. But especially like if I'm doing like a clown, like part of my show now is like the first 5 minutes is like a mime piece.
Right.
And if I go and do that at like a bar in Berlin and everyone else is talking about Anmeldung, it's not going to go down very well. And I've tried it before, and it's like the whole idea is that maybe if it's really good, it should. But there's such like a mountain for people to get over of what the fuck are you doing, mate?
Yeah.
To get them to the point where they're on side and now they're laughing. And that's the thing I think I struggle with here. Like, I think I'm not doing anything too crazy, but slightly alternative or off the cuff. And in a scene which is people aren't doing so much of that. People are very much talking
about Anmeldung.
Anmeldung, yeah. Or Tinder or, just being racist.
I call it Berlin comedy bingo. I mean, there's like a bingo card that gets filled out every time. Polyamory is one.
Yeah, like the kind of the Joe Rogan sphere-ness of it all, and then you're being like, and then I'm just going to come up and try and do 5 minutes of mime. It's going to be, it can car crash. Sometimes it goes well.
I mean, you did win the Berlin Stand-Up Award, so there was, you were definitely the standout act there, and you were being your goofy self. So there is something to be said for, can I make this avant-gardeness work in a club room? And I think that there always is a way to do that.
I think you're totally right, and I think that was a good example of it. It was like the kind of, or the thing that I think worked for me is that I was because I was doing I did a clown course just after I did the stand-up course. So when I came to apply for the competition, I think I was thinking about very different things to everyone else. Everyone else quite like material focused, and I was quite audience focused, So I did all that stupid belly roll stuff and lots of like messing around with the audience. And I think it feels quite different when people have only come through standing in small bars and doing the same 5 minutes again and again. That's exactly what you're saying about, because improvising, you're basically following the audience's lead. You're pretending you're not, but you hear a big laugh. You're like, that's funny. I'm going to stick with that. And that's the same thing with clowning. And that can feel very different it's what stand-up should be. And it should be people are watching their clips and be like, oh, there's a big laugh here. This is maybe the joke. But it's often not. And people are like, no, I'm going to actually push what I think is the joke here. When he's like, well, everyone loves this bit. And I think with that, having done improv, and that has helped me kind of be like, look, if this is the stuff that's working, I'm going to do the stuff that's working now.
I mean, I tell students to definitely keep it loose. Don't over-rehearse. Don't learn your set word for word. And it really makes me cringe when they do. Even if they do a good performance, all the other students, what do they know? They're all like, oh, that was amazing. Oh my God, you were so off script and stuff. But I could tell that they were just going through the motions. They've been rehearsing all day at this set that was absolutely was contained within a little cardboard box and didn't bring anyone into it at all. And it was actually, I find that quite painful to watch a word for word set.
Oh, me too. And it's when you see stand-ups are like, they laugh at their own jokes because they're like trying to say this is when you're meant to laugh now.
Yeah.
Like, well, if that's not when the laughs are happening, they're like...
if they plan to put the laugh in, like that's,
That's actually probably that's the saddest thing in stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Is when people... and I think it happens quite in this bit we're about to play with me. It's like pause for applause, nothing.
Well, I think without further ado, let's listen to it.
Thanks very much, guys. Whoa, fuck. Lovely to be here tonight in Berlin. Nice to see all you beautiful real people here tonight. Also to see, some members of the imaginary community. here. Got an imaginary person there, got another imaginary person there. Last night I did a gig and everyone in the audience was imaginary. It went really well. The imaginary community have actually always been huge supporters of my work, for a very, very long time.
So obviously you get a huge laugh for, where you're like in ... Berlin, and I think like people are just suddenly they're so on board. They know this is a goofy guy, this is a goofy character.
Yeah.
Well, we know he's joking, and I'll tell you my opinion on why the imaginary thing didn't work that well. And it's because you now just start talking bullshit, like a sort of not real thing, and inadvertently you're shitting on the show. So these are two kind of like no-nos a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that was, So like it's very important at the top of a show to start with something that's kind of quite real. So I think actually the next bit that we're going to listen to, the dating thing, it's actually got a kind of real core to it. And this one has no real core to it. It's like if the only real core one could ascertain is that you're saying this gig isn't very good.
Yes.
And in a way, I'm not very good for playing at it. And then you sort of say, and I know, obviously, we know that you're just joking. But if we were to take one relatable core of it, it's like, it's not going well here and before.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. It's because like I kind of did that off the cuff at
I thought it might have done, yeah.
2 gigs before, not this one, 2 gigs before, and it had gone really, really well.
Yep.
And then like I'm like, okay, I'm going to plan to do it, and I think maybe it was a bit of a less busy night. The vibe wasn't quite as good, and it did maybe feel like I was shitting on the
I can imagine it both going very well, and like this gig, which I can tell, listening to the whole thing, it's a weird energy in the room kind of thing. So it's a really risky one to start with. And of course, as we both know, sometimes when you do something off the cuff, it's fucking awesome. And then when you try it and do it again, it's trite all of a sudden.
They can smell a rat.
They smell it. They smell it stinking rat.
So be authentic.
Yeah.
Up top.
AuthenticComedy.substack.com. Great. Let's get into the next bit.
I want to talk to you guys about the subject of love. Some fans of love in the house. Nice, thanks. So me and my girlfriend, she won't mind me saying this, we were having some issues. We were having some arguing between us. So we had to kind of like really look at the relationship. And we just started this kind of new kind of relationship called a broken up relationship. A broken up relationship is kind of like polyamory. Like we see other people, but the difference is we don't see each other. And the good news is we're not arguing anymore. The bad news is I am technically homeless. And it's tricky because my love languages are words of affirmation and sexy time. And words of affirmation and sexy time are two things that are very hard to get when you're in a broken up relationship. Now, I'm going to perform a small poem I wrote just after the breakup. It's called After the Breakup. After the breakup. The sex swing soon became the wank swing. The bedroom soon became the wank room. And the kitchen became the other wank room. The garden became the wank garden, but then just went back to being the garden again because the neighbour's dog was becoming distressed. Thank you very much.
So I think this would have been a lovely joke to start with because it's just really real and true. I know that you have gone through a big breakup, and it's very, very funny. I would say to make that work even better, I think you need to bury the lead a bit more. So you sort of start by saying, we're having some hard times. And then I think that great reveal of a broken up style of relationship, I think it would hit even harder if you just sort of say, relationships change a lot, don't they? Like, don't even mention that you're having a hard time at all. So then when the reveal that you've broken up will actually be much harder.
Yes.
Much bigger in that.
Okay, yeah.
This is a little clever thing to do there. And I think this stuff is all really good. I think this is obviously a new bit of material, isn't it? So I think we could spend a little bit more time in some of the areas there. I think the polyamory idea...
it's almost like I do the joke and then I've got this other joke, which is but like the punchline's the same as the first bit. It's broken up relationship and they're like, yeah, okay.
It's like,
we heard this
I
joke.
feel a tension of you wanting to bring it back to, but it's a breakup.
Yeah.
And I think we could actually have some more fun with making some jokes about polyamory, and then to the point where we've sort of forgotten about the breakup. And then when you bring the breakup back, it's very, very surprising again. So it's just because that bit is a bit short, I think. But of course, this reveal is I'm technically homeless is just such a wonderful phrase and very funny. As you can see, you always have to listen when you listen back to a tape is where do the really big laughs come from?
Yeah.
And why are they so big? So it's always because it just strikes people as specific and surprising in that moment. You get good laughs throughout. And I love the poem. I really, really do love that poem, and it's really well placed. And it's a good example of it's a silly poem, but it's totally about the thing that you're talking about as well. So it's a really good marriage of goofy poet voice, and actually it's really real.
Yes.
But that's actually one of my favorite ones of your poems.
Thank you very much. I think there was almost a thing to explore there with the polyamory. It's like the character, the character I'm being is like, we start trying a new relationship type. He's trying to be kind of like woke and Berlin-y, but actually what's happened is he's had a breakup, but he's selling it to himself as if it's, I think maybe something in that, maybe it's almost the lead up could be more, it's like sometimes polyamory works with people. For me, my relationship style is breaking up.
Sure.
I don't know.
It's always about asking yourself, what is the specific thing that I'm trying to say? And honoring that all the way through until you move on to the next bit. Kind of thing. So as I say, I felt this little tension about what actually is this trying to be about, because comparison jokes, which is like I'm comparing polyamory to breakup, they're a bit kind of joke by numbers, we're just kind of running the stats. We do it. So I'm not against them at all, but sort of use them to fool your audience into thinking that you're going to make a mediocre joke, but actually make a joke they couldn't even imagine was actually brewing in the background. But that's easier said than done, of course.
Just make an incredible joke at the end.
Will you just be more incredible? But I think this polyamory thing, because in a way, breakups and polyamory, they're actually quite similar to each other anyway, because their relation, it is a bit like a slow breakup, polyamory. I mean, a lot of people would look at it like that anyway. So if you were going to do a comparison, you might choose something completely different, but generally I don't like comparison jokes because they're quite formulaic. But I still trust you with a comparison joke because I know you're going to do something really weird and unexpected with it.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point, I think.
So, good news for me is I have a new girlfriend now. She's smart, she's funny, she's cool. She's also imaginary. And not only is she imaginary, she's also a supermodel. Yeah, I know, pretty cool. I mean, if you could see what I'm imagining she looks like, wow, you'd be like, how the hell did he get with her? Honestly. But it's not easy going out with a supermodel. The other day we went to this French restaurant, I arrived at the door, the waiter comes up to me and he says, table for one? As if I don't even exist. And then, when we finally do get a table, and he comes up to me, he says, what would you like for dinner? I said, we would have 2 bœuf bourguignon, French place. 2 bœuf bourguignon, please. He says, don't you mean 1 bœuf bourguignon? Just because she's a supermodel doesn't mean she doesn't eat, okay? She loves food. She loves bœuf bourguignon. She likes the way the bœuf mixes with the bourguignon. In the end, we got kicked out for having sex in the toilets. And that is another big issue with going out with someone who is imaginary, is the sex. because often I end up finishing myself off, which wouldn't be so bad, but I also have to start myself off and do the middle bit as well.
Right. Imaginary girlfriend. So I don't know if you know this, but you've fallen a little bit into a Berlin bingo thing, which is sort of setting up, I've got this girlfriend, oh, she's made up.
Okay.
So just a little bit, tiny bit. But I really like what you did with it. Obviously, you went several beats further than someone who is just using that as the punchline and moves on, sort of thing. In fact, it's not even the punchline, it's the setup to it, really. You actually just set that all up. And, I notice it's not as strong as the other bits. I guess that's why you brought it to the show. And it's because, again, it's the same as the intro. It's just like, it's about something literally that isn't real, that you've set up that isn't real. And, in the triangle of what makes something funny, it's surprise and relatability make something funny. And it's just, people can't relate to this. It's just silly, silly, silly. So there's really nothing for us to tangibly get on board with. It's still funny because there's a couple of really good lines in it, the sex in the toilets and stuff like that, but I just can't, my heart can't attach to it in the way that I usually can with your material, where you'll say something very devastatingly real after you've been a silly bugger.
I think that it's a little bit esoteric, isn't it? It's a bit like, okay, so what are you basically, what are you on about?
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, because it is obviously made up. The thing I'm trying to do, which obviously isn't quite working, is it's almost like a sketch rather than a bit of it's like a guy who thinks all his problems with his relationship is because his girlfriend's a supermodel, when actually it's because she doesn't exist. So it's like trying to be like, oh, and the waiter said table for one because he was obviously obsessed with her and did the food thing. It's like, it's kind of almost more of a sketch than it is a...
Yeah. And I like all that. I like all as if I don't even exist. They're all really funny things to say, but it's about something that we just can't grasp onto. We just can't make that same connection with you. And I suppose, as you say, it's this sort of mixed media thing. Like, how do you mix media at a club show? Like, they're probably not going to, in a 7-minute set, be ready to now see a sketch that's in a sort of different tone. That's the trouble with doing clubs, is you unfortunately have to tailor your material to the fact that your audience is going to be a very mixed bunch of probably quite boring people at the end of the day. And you have to work with them. They're not your art school mates anymore. And that's the way it is. And I get the want to make your own hour show. And that way, you'll draw your own audience to you and everything. But there's certainly a lot to be said for creating the best possible club show that you can as well.
Yeah, you are totally right. The stuff that, because there is stuff which, there's some stuff which I feel like with my stand-up, which I feel like, I'm saying things that I don't maybe think are funny, but I know get big laughs. But then there's some stuff which I think is really funny, and it does get big laughs with kind of any audience.
That's the Venn diagram, isn't it? It's things that you think is funny and things the audience thinks is funny.
Yeah.
And sort of get rid of the rest, really. And you can have a couple that are just for you, as long as you use your clowning to go, well, I liked it. That's my favourite joke.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I certainly do that. I mean, I always have a couple of just really weird ones that are just for me. And I sort of, it's almost like a challenge. Can I save it after this?
Yes. Okay, yeah. So do you think I have to bin it?
Well, I mean,
needs to be in the bin.
I think that these things I think it needs to go back in the oven.
Yeah.
It's not quite done yet. Just know that, if the core of it is bullshit, it's very difficult to make it work on a club level, because unless you are the guy that just comes out, you're doing a character bit of just everything I say is bullshit. But I don't want you to do that, because as I say, it's those devastatingly true punchlines that you do that makes it really, really good, and that's why people laugh really, really hard. So I say never put stuff in the bin, but yeah.
I sometimes wonder with some of these bits that, when I first write a bit, and it's happened quite a lot of different times, where it's like I've written it quite big, and tried to pull a lot out of this kind of silly concept, when really maybe it's just 2 lines. Maybe it's like, well, I tried an imaginary girlfriend, but I got kicked out for having sex in the toilets. Oh, bang, bada bang, we're in, we're out, and I'm not being dragging the audience into a fake.
He's already dead.
My imagination, there's.
I think that could be said for a lot of jokes in general.
Yeah.
that this could just be a couple of lines sort of thing. I certainly say it a lot in class where it's like, this is such a great idea. I want it to be a minute and not 4. You know?
Yes.
Squeeze all the air out of it. But yeah, I do. There's definitely something in it for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, my favourite bit in it is that everyone thinks Boeuf Bourguignon is funny. I think like that was the biggest discovery, saying the way the Boeuf mixes the Bourguignon.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
well,
that's a good joke too.
how can I just stick with that? Okay, I suppose that's what I found.
But I think Boeuf Bourguignon in something where the core of it is more relatable, you know, would be an even better joke.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that thing. Do you think it's just the kind of leading them down the garden path, the audience feeling a bit mistrustful of me being because it's obviously bollocks. Like,
because for a good comedy to work, I have to be able to imagine myself in that situation, and I can't.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that makes it difficult to make it really funny, and rather than just some well-written lines that are thrown out there.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. And like the bits that did kind of land a little bit, like having sex in the toilets and things, is because they put themselves in the shoes of he's having a wank.
He's wanking in the toilet.
Wanking in the toilet. Which is like, okay, he maybe got kicked out for wanking in the toilet, and this is what this is my way of telling you that.
Yeah.
You can kind of picture that as a scene, and it's a funny way of saying I had a wank in the toilet, having sex with my imaginary
I mean,
girlfriend.
you know, that could be the whole setup, couldn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, so got kicked out of a restaurant for having sex in the toilets.
Yeah. Granted, she was imaginary. Yeah, because then because that bit feels like, oh, I'm actually like revealing a bit about myself, but trying not to, you know, when the rest of it is like, well, you obviously didn't go to this restaurant, you didn't do this, and you didn't do that. Maybe you did have a wank in the toilets. Though.
Yeah, we're all like, well, he probably did that. He probably had a wank in the toilets. I mean, you know, the good thing about a lot of people in Berlin, and I'm sure in lots of scenes, is they don't really write new jokes. They don't write new jokes, so they just cling on to the 5-10 minutes that works really, really well. And I think as long as you're always writing, you don't ever need to be precious about material, and that's a good thing. Obviously, it's easier said than done to be writing. I mean, when I was back in London, I ended up doing that. I ended up clinging on to the same thing because you feel like every gig is an incredibly important gig, you know, and you have to get over that and just take risks. But I also remember not being creative in general after a while, just because I think I didn't like myself. Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
That's the thing. And then you end up, I feel like you can end up in a really weird, vicious circle. I feel like I have of being kind of wed to certain bits. And then when you know what, the audience always can smell a rat. Like when you stop being in love with your bit and you're like, oh, well, it's a bit of a tough night. I'll just roll out this. I'll roll out my circumcision bit, or I'll roll out hemorrhoids or whatever. This is all my bits are all kind of below the waist stuff. And then that starts not to go down well. You're like, they know that I don't like doing this anymore.
But the wonderful thing is you can still come back to those bits and rediscover the joy again. So I always say to people, write a killer 5 minutes and then move on from it. Then start working on the next 5 minutes. And then a year later, when you've got your 6 amazing 5-minute bits, you'll love those earlier bits again because they'll seem fresh compared to the last 5 minutes that you wrote. All easier said than done. Yeah. Just be amazing. Try and do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think... Yeah, you are right. Trying to not be precious. And it's that thing of, often I find, like I write a bunch of bits like these, and maybe there's some bits, or maybe it's something just like the way the Boeuf mixes with the Bourguignon, which like months down the line will actually find its home in a bit that actually makes sense and actually
it'll pop
works.
right back into your head when you're talking about a restaurant. You'll be like, oh, I can do Boeuf Bourguignon.
Yeah. Or like, that's what the whole joke is. I had all this poetry stuff, and then finding that kind of like the poetry, I couldn't give up. What was it? My bit. Shit. I had all this stuff about poetry. I think I did it at one of your nights, actually, stand up here, and then found that the only bit in the whole 7 minutes that was working was poetry's my life. If you tried to take away poetry from me, it'd be like taking away the money my parents give me.
I love that line.
And that was the only bit, and it was really like, but it was hidden in this mess of extra stuff, and then you just kind of like, months down the line be like, maybe I wrote 6 good words out of that 300.
But then because the thing that the most recent thing you write is better than it should be your best stuff. It usually is your best stuff. So then peppering in the best thing that you said 6 months ago onto that just really enhances what is actually a great set in the making. So it all works in the end. it's all gonna work out in the end, Theo.
Yeah, thanks.
That's what I'm going to leave you with.
I really appreciate that, Caroline. I trust you. And if it doesn't, obviously,
Yes, do email me.
I will be emailing you and unsubscribing.
That's about the length of it. Unless there's anything else that you want to talk about popped into your head.
Oh, I do have a plug. I got my solo show on the 4th of July at Comedy Cafe Berlin at 8 p.m.
Fantastic.
1 hour, music, poetry and comedy.
Amazing. All right. Yeah, that's it then.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much. Bye.
Bye.